Was quitting my job at this amazing recording studio the end of my career as an audio engineer? My name is Thomas and I took my dog Juno on a road trip to Spain after quitting my dream job at this amazing recording studio. In the previous video, I've talked about how I got my dream job at RedBull and all the amazing projects we did until they decided to fire me. And in this video, I'll talk about why I got rehired by the same studio, now called the Atlantis Studio, and why I am leaving this $1 million studio to go work from my home studio instead. Okay, so let's pick up where I left off. Now, the year after RedBull sold the studio was a little bit weird. I had to get back to my home studio setup, which was kind of nice. I mean, I already had my ATCs, I had my Neve 1073s, the DBX 160s, and in that period of working from my home studio, I actually started asking myself if I needed that big studio at all. And exactly that thought process later sparked content ideas like plugin versus hardware here on YouTube. So the reason I started doing content in the first place is because very often in the studio I would meet very amazing artists or producers, but they just lacked a bit of engineering knowledge. For example, when they would do a vocal recording session and I would patch in a really nice mic into a 1073 and a CO1B and then into the Apollo Twin, they often were unaware that they now had to dial in the preamp gain on the 1073 itself instead of on the Apollo Twin. It was actually this exact scenario that made me record my first reel for Instagram, because I was tired of explaining every session how it worked, and I thought, hey, I can just make one video, and if it gets shared around a lot, now everybody knows how that shit works when they come back to my studio. After a couple of months of working from home and sometimes in a studio here or there, I got involved with the RedBull Studios, now called Atlantis Studio again, and I could start doing sessions and creating content from there again. The reason I got rehired is because I first of all had made a name for myself, so the new owner knew who I was, and I put that entire studio together. So if there is anybody on this planet that knows how everything works in that studio, it's going to be me, isn't it? It was great to be back in the studio again to record, mix, do fun sessions, and create my content, because now I didn't only have to promote my own business, but also the studio business as well. All packed and ready to go? Let's hit the road. This felt like a new adventure, a fresh start, setting up a new business, and I had to figure out how to get that studio filled up, and most importantly now, get people to pay for the time they spent in that studio. And this was exactly where my content now came in really handy, because I could use that to not only promote myself, but also promote the studio and show everyone that the studio was open for business and what type of quality we were offering. Building a new business takes a lot of time, and that's essentially what we had to do, because yes, we continued from the existing RedBull studio, but the big difference was that the client base of the RedBull studio was used to not pay for studio time. And that was kind of different, because if you're used to getting stuff for free, it doesn't really hold the same value. So we basically had to start from scratch again and get new people in. The Atlantis Studio is located in the Q Factory, which is basically one big building that's just focused on music. They've got 30-ish rehearsal rooms, 2 concert halls, multiple studios, schools like Abbey Road Institute and the Amsterdam Conservatory. So if there would be a perfect place to set up a studio, it would be in this building. I had so many great plans, like connecting the 2 concert halls upstairs down to the studio so we could mix the concerts that were going on up there live in the studio on the SSL. We even could have gone as far as doing all of that in Atmos, so recording it in Atmos in that concert hall and then mixing in Atmos in the studio itself as well. Or even keep it simple and just do multiple day writing camps with in-house accommodation and food. Okay. That's getting too noisy, sorry. If there's one thing I learned from running the Atlantis Studio, it's that if you're renting out a studio in the dry hire way, In my opinion, it needs to have these three things to be successful. First, it needs to have great gear and facilities. So this could be that it has Atmos capabilities, or that it has a great vocal chain with very exclusive mics, that it has a very big live room with great instruments. This is what gets your client into your studio in the first place. Secondly, you need a great vibe. Now, the easiest way to do this is to get a couple of couches and nice rugs and stuff that makes people feel like home. And this is what makes people want to stay in your studio. And third, and most importantly, is that you need skilled and kind people running that place. Because you can have all the gear in the world, but at the end of the day, if you're not a nice person to work with, or you're messing up what they're recording, nobody's gonna come back, are they? And that's what's the most important, getting people to come back. As soon as we drove into France, it got cold and windy. Great to be one step closer to rainy Amsterdam. Look at that. Oh, two of them as well. Who's gonna buy a Porsche with me and just drive, do road trips like this together? I stopped at this gas station at the right time. I'm so glad I had the camera out for that. Okay, slowly I was getting more responsibilities over at the Atlantis Studio, which I felt was great, because besides being head audio, I now also took on the role of operational manager, which I proudly took on, but it also had a downside, because I was also responsible now for planning in the sessions, planning in engineers. There was a lot of emailing involved, and there was also the side of invoicing and chasing down payments, which wasn't really the stuff I got excited about when I first started producing, engineering, or creating content. Running a high-end recording studio also means it's going to be more likely that you're going to work with higher-end artists. So I've had Lil Nas X come through, I've had sessions with Stoneboy, but also Dutch artists like Antoon, for example. He really loved renting out the Neve room to prepare for his Ziggo Dome shows, and Ronnie Flex, who came by the studio to record his band for his upcoming album. And also one big project we did, which nobody could know about at the time, was the comeback of the band Kane. Kane is a Dutch rock band who had a big success back in 2005 until 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And 2 years ago, they started coming to the studio to work on their comeback and their new album, and working up to 5 Ziggo Dome shows. And the studio was the perfect environment to not only record their new album, but also do the rehearsals for those shows. But in between those sessions, running the studio was tough. I figured out quickly that not a lot of people really need a studio of this level. People would rather spend their money to buy equipment they would own and then figure out the engineering side of it, than to spend over $100 an hour at a high-end studio. And the more I tried to make the recording studio business work, the more I found out how bad of a business model a recording studio is. So at some point I started asking myself if I should actually keep on trying to make it work. Everybody around me always mentioned how amazing that studio was and how privileged I was to be working there and how amazing it looked on social media. But every time I asked myself if I was truly happy there, the answer was no, I wasn't. I'm never gonna learn, am I? But hey, what else do you want if you're driving for 13 hours? You gotta eat something. We're here in the hotel room. Juno's getting comfy. Halfway there. Almost home. So I've spent the past 3 years working on my business, working on my brand, and building a platform that will hopefully eventually help you improve your recordings, mixes, productions. And building all of that is a lot of work. So I started with doing one reel a week, and you spend way more time on it than you should, and the results are way lower than you would expect. The first couple of months I spent hours and hours on reels, only for them to get maybe 2,000 or 3,000 views and not really gain any traction. So believe it or not, but at some point I came very close to quitting the social media game completely. I think it's time for bed. See you tomorrow. Okay, ready for day 2. Got 8 more hours of driving to do. I've got a little bit of waking up to do. I really wanted to start filming right away, but my brain says no. So first, get some baguette in the system and some coffee. Croissant. Oh, nom, nom. Juno's like, dude, that's not fair. Sorry, bro. Once the Will It Microphone series on TikTok absolutely blew up overnight, I wasn't really considering quitting the social media game anymore. I just woke up to 1 million views. What? Overnight, I gained thousands of followers, and I could finally see myself making a living from what were essentially my 2 biggest passions. This was exactly the push that I needed, and I decided to double down and do a video every single day. And it was great to get that flow going and finally see the result of all that hard work. And while TikTok was doing great, Instagram was still very much behind, and I wasn't really able to get that to gain much traction. But I'm no quitter. So I pushed, and there it was, my very first Instagram reel with 1 million views and my first crazy increase in following. The exact same thing that happened on TikTok now started happening on Instagram. I don't know what's happening today, but the Porsche gods are with us. Look at this GT3 RS. That's insane. I was living my true dream life. I was mixing for artists, I was running my dream studio, and I was creating content to entertain and share some of my knowledge. So my career, my socials, and my business were growing like never before, but the studio didn't run itself. So I had to go back to doing 90-hour work weeks to make sure that the mixes met their deadlines, that I had enough content coming out, I had sessions to do, and now I also had to do the operational management of the studio. And it all got to a point where I felt I wasn't able to get back into a good mood again. I wasn't able to be creative anymore, and I wasn't able to be funny anymore. And I hated that. The studio that once was the ultimate dream, the place that has felt like more of a home than any of the homes I have ever lived in, now started to feel like the 9-to-5 I so desperately wanted to avoid. Let's make a best of both world sandwich from Spain, from France. That's good. Juno likes that too. Look at him. And the sun started shining. What more do you want? Got about 5 more hours to go. We just entered Luxembourg, so then we're going to Belgium, and then we're almost home. As I started working more and more from the home studio and expanding my setup, I started to ask myself if I really needed that big studio. Because maybe I could just rent a studio whenever I would need one for a recording session, and then mix from home. Because actually the results I was getting whenever I was mixing from my home studio were actually so much better compared to whenever I worked from a big commercial studio. So at that point I asked myself if I really wanted to keep on doing the studio thing, and I think you know the answer to that one. It was time for me to start doing what made me happy and what was best for me personally, but also as a business. So together with the owner of the Atlantis Studio, I decided that it's best that I take a step back and somebody else takes over that has the time and the headspace to make this studio a success. And as we're getting closer and closer to home, I think there is one big question that's still left unanswered, and that is, what the hell I'm going to do now. So first we're going to head back onto the road and then I'll tell you all about it. Hello, Mr. Porsche. 21 kilometers. Amsterdam, baby. We made it. And we're back home. And we came home to a lot of boxes. First, 2 boxes of DW Fern. You'll see soon enough what's happening with those. Some Apollo boxes. The new X4. And then we've got an Apollo X16 to replace the X8 over there. And then some biodynamic boxes, of which I cannot tell you yet what it is, so that will remain secret. And in the next video, you're going to see how I set up the mini SSL and all the outboard gear with the new Apollos. But for now, I think you all want to know what I'm about to do next, so let's run through it. In short, I'm going to put full focus on my own business, which is mixing, recording, producing, and of course, creating all the content, because it has never been this busy ever since I came back from the road trip. I've been fully packed. As I mentioned earlier, I am very happy with my home studio over here, and I have been doing all my mixing work already from this studio, and I will continue to do so. And then whenever I'm in a situation that I need to do full band recordings or proper vocal setups or stuff like that, I'll just go out and cherry pick the right studio for that job. And the studio tours that I've got coming up are hopefully going to help me find the best studios in not only the Netherlands, but also in the rest of the world. Also, I will be putting more of my focus on YouTube long form content. I think you've noticed already that the last couple of months I've been posting every single week, and I'm trying to keep that up. And also the time I don't have to spend on running a studio right now, I can put into creating content for the virtual internship as well. I also want to start doing more production work, so producing tracks and be more in the producer role, and then make the cross between engineering and production. So actually get involved in an earlier stage of the production process so we can actually make a difference. So not only fix the shitty recordings that other people have done, sorry, not really sorry actually, but now actually get involved when the recording process is happening and actually make a difference there. Because I think there is where we can all level up our productions and eventually our mixes and how our tracks are going to sound. And what I'm most excited about is that I'll be traveling a lot more in the future, with first coming up a trip to Abbey Road Studios in London. It's going to be very, very cool what we're going to do there, but I can't say anything about it yet. And I also have a dream for next year, and I might need your help for this. I know I've just come back from a road trip and I didn't even unpack yet, but I'm already planning the next one. In the new year, I would love to grab the car, put Juno in the back seat, and drive through Europe, visit cool places, meet fun people, and tour amazing studios. And if you want to help me make that dream come true, there's a couple of things you can do to help out. First of all, very simple, and the Dutchies will like this because it's free. Liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment helps a lot in getting me to grow this channel. Secondly, you might want to consider buying something through my Toman affiliate links down below in the description. It won't cost you anything extra, but it will give me a little bit of a kickback so I can keep the channel going and eventually actually go on that road trip. And last but not least, if you look below this video, you'll see a join button, and that join button will get you to 2 kind of memberships to this channel. First of all, you've got the early access and extras. If you join that membership, you'll get all the videos a couple days earlier than everybody else, and you'll get a couple of fun extras like behind the scenes content and some other fun stuff. And the second membership you'll find there is the virtual internship. This is for those of you that want to level up their productions, recordings, and mixes, because this gives you access to exclusive mix breakdowns and very in-depth recording walkthroughs walkthroughs, as well as in-depth videos about setting up gear, doing maintenance, all of that stuff. Take a look at that for yourself, and if you decide to help out making this dream of mine become a reality, I will be forever grateful. That is it for me in this video. I'll see you in another one. Later.